Hello, everybody. Thanks again for coming. And week, whatever it is. So yes, I did some preparation for this. We are moving to the wings today, and because the wings are quite big, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, I figured if I could do one, I can replicate if I'm happy with what I've done today, rather than trying to do everything. So this is what I've got. Uh, on the wing, that's what I've chosen to do, how I've chosen to make it look. So, I haven't finished it properly. I haven't finished on the highlights on the green bits, which will get brighter, like the flesh main body part. But the colours are matching the inner ear and his tummy, rather than go off in another direction with the different colours. The idea as well is that I wanted to have it darker towards where the fingers are, where the wing structure is, and lighter, almost making it look like it could be more translucent down the bottom. I'm just going to move that there, illuminating a bit better. So yeah, that's what I am going to try and do. So we're going to use regular paint brushes, and I ended up using the dry brushes again, but I didn't use them as dry brushes. I used them as stippling brushes to get these effects.
Did you ever go at the texture palette?
I didn't know because I was, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's still untouched up there, so it seemed a lot. Priming it and everything seemed like a lot of work to go for a relatively small area. So hopefully I can reproduce what I've done here. So the first thing I did, I went back to my little color swatch thing that I posted in one of the things. Here we go. Just to remind myself what colors I used, because it's easy to forget. Thank you, LJ, for reminding me that swatches are a thing. So I've got my camouflage green and the goblin green mix. I'm going to paint the whole thing with this, not because it wouldn't work doing the ready flesh tones on black. They would, but it's kind of going along the same. We painted this green before doing the tummy, so I just want to make sure these colours were going directly on a green, because if any of that comes through, it will look better that way. The idea as well that neatness and a perfect coat isn't critical, because we are going to cover it with this is just thinned as normal, biggish brush, because we just want the coverage. It's a nice flat area. Now I need to explore the palette thing a bit more. I probably would if I was doing it on a vehicle or something.
Yes, certainly. I mean, if you're doing it on a large area, it's a good idea to use that. And I think from what I've seen on videos, if you're going to do the dry brush technique on something that's incredibly precious and you spent a long time on, having something that you can then just test to make sure that the amount of paint's correct and you've got the right color and all that sort of thing. So it's a really good idea. And the other thing is that if you use it on tissue paper, they suggest that will dry out the brush too much, or you won't have control over it than you would if you used a texture palette.
There's also a risk that if you use it on tissue paper, you might pick up lint from the tissue paper. That's something that I thought about, which you wouldn't necessarily want to pick up little bits of paper and then deposit it on your model. So so what I'll end up doing is, when I come to do my final highlights on the green bits on the wings, I'll probably do a little bit more highlighting on the back, which didn't get quite as much attention as the front. I also painted, I thought I'd try and paint that wing first, because our guy's looking in this direction, and so that's the least obvious. If you're looking at it kind of like that, that's the least obvious wing. This is the important one we're doing now, as it were, in the way we look at the model. So we're now just up against it drying nicely.
Would you use a hairdryer normally to dry it off?
Oh yeah, I will. I might use a hairdryer and mute you for a second, because it's not easy. I don't have to, because no one else is trying to talk. But for the sake of what we're doing, and it's something else I was thinking about but didn't do. You've got I mentioned this last week. We've got the veins on here, which you can see kind of picked out to a degree. I had thought about doing extra veins and things in it, but at the moment I'm just going to keep it simple. It's one of those things you can go as crazy as you like and get carried away, but I was trying to make sure I did everything in the time frame we had. So in theory, this is all doable in tonight's session, getting it all done.
Would you, if you were to do the veins, would you roll up a very tiny piece of milliput like you did?
No, I'd paint it. It would all be done through painting.
Oh, okay. Right.
So I found that. I'll just take my jumper off. I got very, very hot all of a sudden. There's a modeler who wins Golden Demons left, right, and centre called David Soper, and I had it in my head. I remembered that years ago he had done a bunch of Dark Eldar flying creatures with wings, and they were pretty impressive, and they had kind of like veins in them. So I've actually found that, and it's kind of going in the direction I'm going with here, but the wings are slightly different, and he painted little thin veins on it. So I could do it, and not to make it 3D, but just to, we've got the 3D ones molded in there, but I don't think I'd go to that length on this. You could do, but that'd be tricky just to get it to settle down that deep, or that shallow, so to speak.
Yeah.
So 10 seconds of hairdryer.
I guess with the hairdryer, it doesn't damage the paint. It doesn't. Obviously, it heats it up, but it doesn't do any damage to the paint or the figure, right?
No. It's. I mean, I use it on a kind of not the hottest or the most intense setting. So, right. And it's not quite dry, but I've got to get other paint. So, all right. So now these are the colours I use on my Nycaloth. I used beige red on the tummy before as a starting point. Now I'm going to use a mix to start off, because I want it to start off darker. So I'm using the cavalry brown that's got a lovely red tone to it, and the beige red. And what we're going to do is right. Well, we're going to use inks in here as well today. So I'm trying to make sure we use not everything in the box, but every type of paint out there.
Did no inks came with the box, did they?
That was a wash. Sorry, sepia wash.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use that later as part of this process. Right. So what did I do? I'm going to use the middle-sized brush, and I'm going to start off with a mix of the up slightly beige red and cavalry brown, so the exact amounts aren't critical. And I'm just dabbing my brush into it. I'm just kind of, I don't mind, yeah, I'm not dry brushing. I want this to cover, so I'm just going to dab over all the area I want to be this color. So for this bit, I'm quite happy to get it less than perfect coverage, because we're going to be going over it again. And the other thing is that don't worry too much about, obviously, huge brush, very careful little area when it gets close to the body and close to the flesh, or close to his back. So I'm not going to go all the way in there at this point. I might even go in and just touch that up with a brush. Then carefully repeat that on the inside. So using the dry brush here as a paintbrush, really, but stippling as opposed to paint strokes.
Simon wants to know, why is that stippling method better than just painting that colour normally?
You could just paint that colour normally. In fact, I'm wondering now, when I did it last time, did I not, when I did the first one, is that not what I did? I can't remember. I kind of got stippling in my head, and now I'm kind of wondering, yeah, this first coat could quite a very good, not just a question, but a good point. Yeah, I think
You're practicing your technique?
I might just go and plonk a little bit. Go back towards the middle.
I think, yeah, we'll demonstrate stippling in a bit with slightly lighter colour.
Yeah, so it will go, I think, I just forgot how I did it, basically. I've written some notes, and I've got stippled next to it. But I wrote that after I'd finished, as opposed to as I went along.
Master is flawed.
But it's I do like the colour, actually. It's a good kind of, it's not quite a human flesh colour, but it's a little bit, I don't know really what the word is, uncomfortable, as it were, or putrid at the end. So we're going to go back and get a bit more. Yeah, I think I missed saying. Okay, so that really doesn't ideally need to dry, and it's not quite dry. Bear with me a second. I'm going to dry it. So hopefully we'll be over pretty quickly, so we can do that up.
No, we can't really hear you over the top of the...
You can or can't?
We can't, no.
Okay, no, that's understandable. Right, so I'm now going to do the proper stippling. So I've got mostly, well, at this point, I'm going to dab that. It could be on your palette. I'm going to do this mostly in the lower, or I'm going to do it over all, even if I'm going to go over with another colour. So I'm going to do, the top half is dark, so maybe a third bit, starting a third down. I'm doing this slightly lighter version. Now the thing is each one of these, a perfect finish isn't really necessary, because we are going to go in at the end and do glazes and little, I guess you could call them washers. You can see how when you get into that, where the fleshy coloured bit's really narrow, you can see it's gone quite red and pinky in there. So we'll be doing kind of washers in that kind of zone to accentuate effects. Go in the smaller brush in a minute. So yeah, so it's still a bit darker at the top. I'm going to try and repeat that on the inside. Still quite a bit of paint on the brush that is going on. And of course you can go as crazy with this as you like.
I was just looking up about David Soper, you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
He won the Golden Demon in 2022. He's won lots of awards as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, beautiful stuff.
He's got a good blog and shares quite a bit of how he does it. Very meticulous. He's not got a big output as such, but he is incredibly delicate work, which is a very distinct style. It's very much his.
Yeah, I can see that. It's very accurate blends.
Yeah, lots and lots and lots and lots of layers. Very, very gentle, thin repeats of coats, which we'll do a bit of here. So I've now got more of the beige red, and so I've lost a lot more of it on the brush this time. So I'm going to do that maybe about half to the bottom as opposed to, and you can just when you're going up to where you want it to be less, you just don't press so hard. So
is your paint thinned much?
no, I haven't thinned it at all. Like the dry brushing, I've kept it quite thick overall relative to how I would normally apply it. Because if any texture comes out from it as a result of this, if it gets any the stippling application gives it potentially texture, which will come out. You can maybe see a little bit on the wings here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's come from the stippling because the paint's thick, as opposed to trying to do thin layers, and we'll do the layers over it. That helps with how I envisage these big leathery wings to work. Right, I'm gonna move on to the smaller brush. Do that properly later. And I need to get, while the paint's on now, I'm just going to try and get a little bit closer into the back in that area. And again, a really awkward angle, a little bit more room on this side to get in there compared to here because of the angle of the figure. So just being a bit more cautious. But that will get a lot of, you can see it's got the browner, redder colours in there.
How do you avoid the sort of chalky look when you're dry brushing? So I've always found that happens to me when I'm doing mine.
I don't I have heard about the chalky thing. I've never experienced it, so I don't know what I do to avoid it. I don't know. And people say that about a lot of colours. You often get a chalky effect, but I've never really experienced that. So unfortunately, I can't tell you
okay.
advice on that one. Right, I'm now, because I want to keep making it lighter and lighter and lighter. We're now going to add in the pale flesh from the prismatic stuff. You could keep it. It's one of those things where, in an ideal world, I would do these both together and try and get the balance right between the two. Hopefully, I can get close to that doing this. So now I'm mixing. It's mainly beige red and the pale flesh to do the next bit going down, and you can just keep going round and round in circles, sort of thing. This time, as I put this on, I'm doing very delicate little. I'm not hitting it very hard, so it's stippling still, but doing it much more gently until I get a feel for how much paint is on the brush. So with stippling like this, I can kind of apply it more aggressively, and here I'm kind of doing a lower third only. Again, we're going to end up doing layers over top of other colours and then some brush work. So the exact brightness this isn't necessarily going to look like that side yet. I'm just laying the foundations of what this will, of the character of this. So I'm just looking at it and thinking, do I want to do more or do I want to do less? It's good. You can see already it's kind of got that darker tone at the top, depending on when I rotate it round. I know you've got a bit of light glare going on there. I guess with that light there, you can see how it's kind of picking up the lighter edge at the bottom. And there's some reflection at the top, but that's darker there compared to there.
Are you going to put the same kind of liver spots and blemishes that you did on the belly on the wings as well?
I kind of toyed with that when I was putting the green on, but I might not. I might leave that just separate, like those are a separate. This is just discoloration of his stomach, whereas this is actually a leathery component that joins bits of his wing up. So at this point, it's one of those things you might go, oh, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I haven't really decided yet.
I guess it will. If you did it the same, it will keep in keeping with it all this skin type, I suppose. No?
Yeah, just kind of working out. For me, it would be like that's discoloration and liver spotty. I can't, because those are effectively fingers of a arm on his back. I can't work out the logic as to why it would be that way, if you know what I mean. I'm kind of that's me being. I know he's a demon, but I'm still trying to think of him in realms of how would that work physiologically, biologically, or whatever. Because that's the way my brain works. So you could, I mean, I was kind of thinking it'd be more interesting to do little. I've actually done. I'll show you in a bit. Rather than doing liver spots, there are actually tiny red lumps in there as well. So when you go into this, and well, let's do that quickly now. Let me just. Oh, hang on. When we go in there, hang on, let me get my hand steady. There's a lot more liver spottiness going on.
Right. Yeah, I see.
It's not just blends. I did little dots and things all over the place to give it, which when you're not looking in close, you don't really see. But and that's almost taking advantage of the stippling texture underneath to accentuate later on.
Okay, so there's actual texture of that as well in there too.
Yeah, when we look at this, you can see how my stippling, when you look at it close, you can see there's darker colours underneath.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you know, it's quite mixed, and you can go as crazy as you like on that. Yeah, you can just keep adding other layers. You can make it dense. I like the idea of having it lighter at the bottom because I kind of feel it has an element of translucency to it. But yeah, so you can see how that stippling is actually stippling. It's hard to see when you're doing it, probably from this distance, but when you zoom in, you can see that texture I'm creating. So these brushes are quite versatile.
I guess you can have a look at bat wings and
things
like that
definitely.
to see how they look in real life. But because this is a fantasy demon, well, I hope it's fantasy.
But that's the thing, is that you can look for inspiration from all directions with these kind of things. It's really tricky to get in this. You can look all kinds of natural things, anything that has kind of that thin stretched skin. I mean, I think even bits of hands and things like that, the colours and stuff when it gets stretched out can have. I say it's a freaky colour, but it's really just my hand colour. I'm a freak. So yeah, I'm now getting much closer to just pure pale flesh, and I'm going to keep that on the very lower edges. Again, starting off delicately, not overdoing it, just to get a feel of how much paint is on the brush. If it's too much, just be a bit more gentle when you're applying it. And again, I'm just going to zoom in. And you can see those kind of textures and things that have happened as a result of stippling, as opposed to super smooth layers of paint.
So why haven't you thinned it as you would have done normally before? Why have you not thinned the paint this time?
I kind of wanted to use the thick element of the paint. So rather than using the layering effect you'd get from thinning the paint, here I'm using the thickness of the paint to build texture. So for the purposes of this, I wanted some texture. If I thinned it, I wouldn't get the texture. I just end up with dabbing watery stuff that wouldn't go on. So it's still got a lot of elements of the dry brushing nature of it. It's kind of dry brushing by the time you've finished, before you get more paint. It is you can see that how that graduation of colour from the darker at the top to the light at the bottom is working.
Yeah, you want your drop brush strokes to appear, essentially, don't you, with stippling?
Yeah. And again, these are kind of things you could, I would say you could potentially, on a larger scale figure, for example, if you're doing, say, a World War one Brit in a big old heavy tunic, you could potentially use this to produce some texture on a heavy jacket. Not any modern materials that would appear smooth, but a big old wool jacket could, you could get texture using this way. So yeah, you can just keep going round in circles with this until you feel you are happy with the transitions between dark to light. There's nothing to say you can't go back to the darkest color and overlap again. And I can try that now just to illustrate.
Are you highlighting any of the veins at that point or not?
Not at this point, no. That will happen, but
it looks like you have. Just
well,
the way
yeah,
the light is picking out.
That's the nature of dry brushing, or this method, or because I'm virtually dry brushing. And another thing as well, which I thought, if you remember when you can still just about see it, but the reason why I wanted to stipple this as opposed to dry brush it is because we've got those very faint printing lines, or what appear to be printing lines. If I dry brushed it, you dry brush the lines in, you can still just about see them here, but they're less obvious because we've stippled as opposed to dry brushing. Dry brushing will accentuate any little thing, whereas this is just applying paint in a particular textured way. So yeah, now just right at the very top, just to see. I don't think I did this before, but I'm going to do it because it might be handy. I'm going to just at the very top, I've got a little bit more of a cavalry brown mixed in with the beige red again. I'm just going to very gently and lightly do that towards the top, just to accentuate that dark again.
And would you have to be happy with it before you started painting the green fingers on?
Yeah. The last thing the next thing we're going to do is, or probably after the break now, is start to go in with these with our next stage, which will be to do glazes and washes to accentuate the folds, the little flaps within the leathery bits, and it will create. You can see that's got that lovely redder tone in there, which we haven't quite got yet. We just kind of put the base elements of that in, so that's where we'll end up. And then once I was happy with all that, the last thing I did was add the green fingers back in. Yeah, so you can see that's got that lovely red tone towards the top. And it's one of those things as well, is that you do all this fanning around, then when you paint the green in, it suddenly goes, ooh, yeah, because you can see how that frames those bits. You're doing a lot of this stuff just on hoping it's going to look all right when you do the other bits. So what I'm just going to quickly do, I'm not going to do any more stippling now before the break. I'm just going to go in. You can see on this one, goes much darker towards the back. Here, I couldn't quite get in with my brush, especially because of the arm in the way. I'm just going to go in and with a kind of a darker cavalry brown mix, I'm going to paint right up to his back, rather than stippling that, just because I'm not going to be able to do it with the brushes, with the giant things. We can do elements of that with glazing and whatnot in a bit. And the other thing I'm going to do is on this underside, is just, I can see that this didn't quite get cleaned up. Still see a mold line under there, always the way. But bits at the underside. Sorry, there you go.
If people do find mold lines while they're painting halfway through, after they primed and after they filled, what would you recommend they do?
For something like that, I'm underneath there. When we got this on the table and we're looking at it, I'm not going to do anything. Personally, I'm not going to do anything about that. That's gone and dusted. I have found mold lines before on figures on painting, which intended for show, and they do indeed. I do indeed. Will carefully scrape them off if they're in too much of an obvious position. I will go back through and get rid of them basically, and then carefully. Usually by that time, it might be the green, and I could probably reapply that green over top of it. Something like that's just too awkward. All those bits are too awkward, and you're not going to see them because they are on the underside.
Yeah.
And unless somebody picks it up and goes, "Oh, I'm going to look under there."
Yeah.
You'll probably get away with it. So yeah, are we close to the perfect time to break?
Yes, we can. Yeah. Works for me.
Yeah, and we'll carry on afterwards doing the next bits. So here you go. Right. Next, now we've done the main. This is effectively, that was all a base coat. Now we're going to do shading and effects and the things that make it end up looking like the other side. So here we are going to use the sepia wash, which is a good color. It's dark. Me being me, I'm not using it as a wash. I'm going to use it more of a glaze and treat its qualities, assuming it's got a quality like an ink, but it won't be exactly an ink. But I don't know. I'm never quite sure. And I'm also going to use bloody red. So the idea being that our fleshy, leathery coloured wing bits are going to end up having darker tones, darker redder tones towards anywhere where it gets close to the what will eventually be the green fingers. So the key here is thinness of paint. So I've got putting some water on my brush. It's not heavily thin, lots of water, but I'm thinning these, and I'm going to add a little tiny bit of red so that my sepia wash, which is a brown colour with a hint of red to it, I guess, but I'm going to make it a bit redder and thin. And I mean, for this, it is better to be thinner than you can see on my finger there, on my thumb. That's pretty translucent. And what we're going to do is, I would say when you're doing this, experiment on the back, because most people won't be seeing the back unless they turn it around to pick it up. When you're happy with the method and what you're doing, turn around to the front and do the front. So effectively, that you've got the back to practice on. Now, using what we've learned in previous stages about the way, and we were talking, people have mentioned about the way paint, brush control and brush usage. I'm going to paint towards the top. So in terms of comfort here, I've turned him upside down because painting down is going to be easier for me at this point than painting up, and the light shines into those shadows. better there. So I'm just going to paint. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not a. As you can see, that paint is kind of flooded, almost like a wash. Towards the top, so we're staining effectively what we've done so far, gently painting upwards, and that, because it's not brown, and because it's not red, it adds a lovely depth.
So you're purposely leaving a blob of paint as you lift your brush to the bottom.
It's not so much purposely. I'm happy for it to be there. I don't mind it being there. With much of this, you can see I'm still using a pretty big paintbrush, partly because it holds a lot of paint still, which means I can keep doing this. But again, as I've said before, it's probably better to be thinner and go over it a couple of times than it is to flood the thing with paint or have it too dark. Doing a lot more closer to the back where it's joined to his body. I'm quite happy for that to have more coverage of this glaze. I'm going to call this a glaze, and we're glazing this into the areas adjacent to the fingers. We'll call them fingers of the wings. And I turn it upside down now, or turn it the right way up, and you can see how that's starting to create some bit more colour tone variation. Not quite as dark as I've gone there yet, but this is a thing that gets built up in layers. I'm going to go on this outside bit here a little bit more.
Yeah, it's really making those fingers sort of stand out from the stretched skin. Have you done this on the other side, this wash technique already?
No, on there, no.
No, sorry, on the
on
other
here,
wing, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but I kind of, this becomes an iterative process. So we're kind of applying it, and you can see on this side, I will eventually end up going back over with lighter paint, lighter tones. And I don't know I guess if I look at this really closely, it's got an element of chalkiness to it because of the texture of this paint, because of the thickness of it, and the lighter colour looks more of a chalky character. But I kind of like that as part of the texture of these things. But yeah, I'm just carefully lining adjacent to those fingers, but also where we've got these slight folds in the wing. I'm just leaving the highlight, or leaving the paler colour we put on at the bottom at the upper points of those. If you get a little bit of paint flooding, I can see myself there. Hey, this is where the new scalpel will come in handy. I can see a hair from a dry brush that got stuck on there, and it's not there anymore. So yeah, this is a case of just going and accentuating those edges of those fingers. and happily being heavier towards the top zones. Which, like I say, if I get a little bit more paint in there, that's fine. I can sort of just add another.
I like the fact that you've mixed the red regular acrylic color with the sepia wash, and it's still kept the properties of the wash.
Well, I have thinned it down quite a bit, so there's still the fact we are still thinning it. But yeah, you can. It's no. You can use anything with anything, and something will happen. Basically.
For me, if I used a wash, it would be the wash color straight from the bottle. I wouldn't have thought of adding a shade or another color to it. I like that idea.
Yeah, and you can add as much or in the end, I'll probably end up, if I remember rightly, I ended up using almost pure red in just at these very top bits in there. Didn't use them in the deeper parts down the bottom. Because I just wanted that it just felt like it wanted to be a little bit redder, a little bit closer to, in the same way it's got reddish in the mouth. It's almost like exposed, or just a little bit more visceral, just a little bit more
fleshy.
Yeah, and because you've got, if you think about a thin flesh that's then pushed together. If you think about our hands, when you look at the folds, they're actually quite red in some of those areas. When you get certain bits, as opposed to being brown or anything. I know these are fantasy dudes and whatnot, but so I'm just going to keep going backwards, and I could just being conscious of time. This is one of those techniques where, or the way you can do it, I can take this so far tonight, and I can happily then keep adding to it afterwards to get it closer to what the other wing looks like. So if I end up only doing one half of this due to time constraints, that's not really an issue. So and because it's thin, as soon as you can see where I put some across here, so there's still the light bit within the folds, and it looks soft. It doesn't look harsh because it's been applied in that with a very thin mix. What I'm going to do now is just add to mix up a little bit more. Oh, that's a little bit too red. Always add more. Yeah, I think with a lot of colours, whether they're inks or washes, I tend to look at them as colours as opposed to what they might be designed as or for. So I look at that as a sepia first before I think of it as a wash or an ink or a regular base coat. That's just the way my mind looks at it. It's the colour first.
So if we weren't using those particular paints, if we were using other things, what would the ink be doing that would be different from what we are doing now?
Yeah, good question. I know inks are have moments of being in vogue, and I know that inks have been. I remember I've got some of the original Games Workshop inks somewhere, still usable, still very good ink. They start off being translucent inks, compared to a pigmented paint. So they're pigments, but they're just in a more fluid base, is the way I kind of, in my head, think about it. You couldn't.
Yeah, you can't separate inks, can you?
Yeah, and you can't get with an ink, you couldn't do a base coat kind of thing. You have to, it's something you apply over another color. You couldn't start off on this black undercoat and build up color with ink. You just end up with seeing the black underneath constantly because there's no proper pigment. So I might be wrong on that front, but it's a thing to add on top of something else. So yeah, I'm just going to just lining the front bits. Like I say, if you can, you've got, if you're doing both sides at once, you could, that's all looking a bit darker on the right hand side at the moment towards the top, which I quite like. I can always go and redo those bits or add a little bit more depth to them later on. I'm putting a few lines around where the folds get quite tight towards the bottom, even though we're going to go back and make that. You can see how we've got that redness around. In some ways, it's quite nice in itself, without adding the green back into it. Logic just dictates that the green is going to be there, but that's quite nice on its own. You could maybe, if you could blend the green up there to kind of turn into this color, it would still look quite nice.
Were you thinking about putting a green glaze on it or something, perhaps, or not?
No, I think I'm probably going to leave it as is. I was thinking of trying to do some of the red tone into the flesh, or where it joins into his back, because that's quite an abrupt. Add more of that reddish tone in the back. But you can go as crazy with this as you like, really, making it keep going back over areas you want to get deeper. We're kind of accentuating the what was that? Accentuating the illusion of depth and color transition.
It certainly works. Looks great.
Right, I'm now going to add a little bit more red to this.
Would you add any more red, like purple or something, to make it even deeper?
You could do, yeah. I didn't on the other side, so I'm not going to here, but that certainly is something that could be tried. I wouldn't discourage anyone.
Would you put it into the deepest, darkest parts of his ear as well, maybe?
You could do that.
Just to keep it in keeping with the...
Yeah, I think one of the things to remember when you're doing this kind of thing is, stay consistent with what you're doing. This will work because, or it's more likely to work because the colours we're using on the wings, we've got elsewhere in him. If we start fanning around with too many other colours, it gets a bit complicated. If you think about us as humans, we don't have a lot of colour variation going on. So unless you were going to create...
Well, also texture as well, isn't it? Not just colour.
Yeah.
That looks great. You having a thought about the horns? I know we're skipping ahead a bit, but have you thought about what the...
Yeah, I think the horns are all going to end up being ivory coloured white. with yellow and browns in them, and the sepia wash will come out again for those. I'm thinking next time we might end up doing metalwork on his armbands and his on the bits and bobs. That needs to be a kind of a separate session on its own, but I'm not sure quite when I'm going to do that yet. Maybe to do it sooner rather than later. No, it's still. Couldn't quite get that hair out. I can still see that hair. It's almost quite a rust colour. Right, so what I'm going to do now is change brushes. So you're getting the idea, basically, of those. Oh, hang on. Cup of tea still warm. Quick sip. Right, I'm now with smaller brush. I'm going to take some of my beige red and elf flesh, or whatever it was. What was it? Elf flesh? Pale flesh.
Pale.
And thin that down. But this time we're not applying it as a glaze or anything like that. This time I am going to, hopefully, and it still needs to be thin, because again, this is a layering. You are layering, but you're layering in a different way. I'm going to, on the bits of the fleshy bits that have got bends that are high, so it would be a highlight if it was a bit of a coat on a coat or a uniform. I'm just going to dab. Let me get that out now. I'm just going to almost do pointel, or I don't know what you call it, lots of little dots.
Pointillism.
And it can, if you paint, you actually kind of, in many ways, for this effect to work, it doesn't matter if it's a bit rubbish or even horribly random, because random is exactly what you want for this. It's I'll put in a little bit more. You'll see if it's light enough and if you're happy with it being that light.
So you're not worried about the putting brushstroke texture in now. You're more concerned about the actual colour, so that's why you're making it nice and thin.
Yeah, I'm just using it in areas where I'm kind of doing highlights, but I'm not doing the highlights as I would normally would with a nice thin, careful stroke. This time I'm doing it because of the nature and texture of the wing being a demon-y kind of thing. The little dots can help with that. And sorry, let's see if I can. Hang on. See how well we can. So yeah, you can see. Can we see that?
Yeah. So you're doing little lines essentially.
They're coming across as lines because of the shape of the tip of my brush, as opposed. I'd rather they were dots, but
Well, I guess you've still got that dithering effect, haven't you? If you've drawn a small line, you'll still have that gradation of that highlight, won't you? From where you lift the
and
brush
bear
up.
in mind that's my fingernail, so these are quite small.
Yeah.
And you can see it when we get up here. You can see how, because they're going into a darker area. Let me get in the middle. Better. Wish I'd clean my phone screen. But yeah, I can do that over all sorts of areas on this. And what I tended to do, I think what I did with the other bit is just like anything else we do. Let me just zoom back out again and get back into just like with any of this kind of stuff, if you feel you overdo it, or you can always take the colour that's roughly underneath, thin it right down and do a very thin glaze over top, which will soften that effect you've done. Now I'm gonna just do some, you can see on this side that they ended up being quite light, and at the moment I'm quite a bit darker on this side at this point in time. I think when I was doing it the other wing, I got so far through it and I thought, well, what is that going to look like with these green bits added back in? How does that fit? I kind of wanted to see, and then went back and added more light bits, basically. So it wasn't a case of going, I'm going to go so far. I can add any of these green bits in now, when I want to. I can add that in at any point in time, because the bit that's messy is the stippling, and we've got the stippling done. So the stippling is the chaotic bit, as it were.
Okay. Well, I've got a question from the floor, as it were. Could you get that effect that you're doing now from light drybrushing?
Yes, but for me, that would be, I wouldn't quite have control over where I'm doing it, because it would be dry brushing to get in such a small area. I would find quite tricky. With this, I am more in control. But yeah, dry brushing would be certainly perfectly valid thing to use.
If you were in a hurry, you could do very quickly.
Oh yeah, you could do. You could certainly do dry brushing. Yeah, nothing whatsoever to say you couldn't do dry brushing. And then another thing, because we're conscious of time, with this lighter colour as well. You remember what we were saying the other week about carefully using the edge of the brush. Where we've got some of these veins, your paint's not too thick, too runny, sorry. A bit in there. With the lighter colour, you can just pick out those veins with the tip of the brush, edge of the brush. And especially when they go into that deeper red zone, they'll really pop.
Can you show us on the focusy bit? Here we go.
Can you show
yeah, yep. I appreciate it's difficult to paint and film at the same time.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of half looking at it. In fact, you can see how they really do pop out. They, in that deeper area, and I can go back over with the thinned stuff again I might do that quickly now just to illustrate. And then, so I would still rather that be thin, but not an overloaded brush. And then on these bits here that are a little bit further out, especially if I were to do them only on the lower side or more of it on the lower side, that gives more three-dimensionality to them.
You've suddenly been working out.
Yeah. There's some big ones at the top here that, unfortunately, I'd argue that a little bit too big compared to the ones on the other side. And then quickly, just to illustrate how we do it in time-wise. Okay. If I were to just mix up some green and olive, or goblin green again, I can now very carefully just paint some of the green back in. I've got too much paint on my brush there. Let's be careful. And you do need to obviously be very careful when doing this. But this is the bit when it will pop out a little bit more. And with the green, the logic is it's going to be exactly the same as when painting the flesh. So dark, starting off with the darker shades, and then adding lighter greens in. But careful, getting that first coat on and getting it on carefully is critical here, because you've got such a contrast between the green and the reddy flesh colour. Do take your time.
Well, that's the beauty of the wet palette, isn't it? You've still got those reds if you needed to go back over it if you made a mistake.
Yeah.
I really like that green and pinky color palette you got going on. It's nice.
Color combo.
Mm.
Yeah. It's quite pleased with that, the way that's come out, and probably the most time-consuming bit could well be trying to paint these fingery bits in neatly. I think you get the idea of what I've done and how you can add. Yeah, you created the color gradation with the color with the stippling, then going back in with the thin layers of sepia and red, covering the whole length of it, kind of ties the whole thing in together again. Then you can go back and add some of those stippled colours, but brushed on in zones and in areas. Add the green back in. It's all separate when you look at that wing I've done, but I've not used any none of those are really dark colours. There's no blacks or anything in there. I don't, but they still look quite vibrant and separate and delineated quite nicely. But yeah, definitely is a as I say, you can paint these green bits in just to get a feel of how it's going to look. When you do the green, when I've done this green, I would go and then what's the word I'm looking for? I wouldn't bother highlighting it straight away. I'd carry on trying to do little bits more of the leathery wing bits. And when I was happy with that, I'd go and do the final highlights on the wings.
Are you going to leave the veins the same colour? Are they going to be the same colour as the flesh? Are you going to have the bluey colour?
I don't think I will make them bluey. I kind of, I can. It's tempting, but I actually quite like that they're a little bit. They're not jumping out. They might be a bit distracting if they were done a different colour. I haven't done that side yet, but for me at the moment, I think it's almost less is more.
Okay.
But yes, could certainly try doing it, or even around there might be a good place to try and do the purpley colour. But yeah, if you were to do maybe a little bit more of a purple, adding some purple into this mix and doing that even even maybe more so towards the centre of the back, as if that's where the blood flow is coming from. Don't know. All ideas to explore.
And also, I guess it's not going to catch as much light through the skin there as well, because it's closer to the back.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So horns next week.
I think we might do horns next week, unless I have or 2 weeks. We got 2 weeks. Yeah, because that's something that will really, if you think of the colours we've got on there so far, having something off-white is really going to make, back to the colour of the teeth again, really going to make things pop.
And you got the yellow in the eye as well. You put some yellow into the ivory, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. We've got.
You got the horns and the nails, fingernails and toenails.
Yeah.
The base, obviously, to do. The weapon as well. Have you ever thought about what the axe is going to do?
So there's the metalwork of the axe and whatnot, and we'll do different colours we can do on that, on the blade and on the handle and his little wrist things, which I'm kind of thinking will probably be metal in the middle and gold or brass around the outside, brass bits around there.
Okay.
And then base as probably 2 more key stages to go, so horns and whatnot, which will be relatively quick. It could be that and the little leather on the glove.
Right. Yes. Yep. Brilliant.
But so carry on. You can see the difference between the base coated green bits of the fingers. There's some lovely little shapes that all I've done on this side is highlight up to the goblin green, and I did use there's a brighter green that we used before, which is called livery green, which I used on the body to go the brighter tones, and I haven't done that yet on the wing, which will happen. But like I say, there's be aware as well that little details like on the back you've got more green compared to that flesh, or that goes higher up on the front compared to the back. You can see.
Oh
and you get those lovely shapes on the top there to highlight, and you've got little linear bits on the wings on the inside there to give it shape and texture. I was kind of toying as well with I'm not going to do it now, but you could easily do little. I've highlighted these to catch light, but you could easily do those in the same way I was doing little dots on the wings. You could easily do almost like stripes across the top to add texture to these fingery bits. So yeah, you can add details and shapes and textures in where they don't necessarily exist, and just have fun with it, basically.
Yeah. Awesome.
So yeah, still a way to go. Didn't get quite as far as I'd hoped.
Well, we've seen the highlighting on the skin, haven't we?
Yeah. I'm not gonna go too far with the green.
So would you like everybody to be at that stage, ready for the next one? So have your wings done?
Yeah. I'll just say as well, one thing I didn't quite do. I'm just going to go back to this ready sepia mess, and I think what I did, so whereas I did the little dots and stuff on the highlight bits down the bottom, and I will make them probably brighter and lighter to match that side. I did go a little bit lighter. The same can be done. Hang on, something on my brush. The same can be done in the shadow areas up here. So, and you can do that to make almost kind of liver spot shapes potentially. So you are adding shape and texture up the top here as well, or in. So you're doing light dots on the highlights down the bottom, and you're doing sepia stuff in the shadowy bits at the top, just to add that kind of shape. You're not after perfect things, shapes and whatever, because it's a leathery lump of flesh, whatever you want to call it. So you're kind of creating. You couldn't dry brush this because it's not on the top, it's in shadows, or in the concave surfaces of that bit at the top. I'll just go and see if I can zoom in on that to illustrate that a bit more, so you can see. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. On that top.
Yeah, top left bit.
Yep.
So yeah, that's and in there as well. You can just keep. When we get up to this area at the top here, because it's because it's can you see that hair?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll probably get rid of that later. But yeah, and you kind of, like I said, you can. I've got. Let me see that just there. That's just pure red, thinned right down. And although you can see that on that side, I'm gonna. I guess you could call this a pin wash in that zone. Oh, sorry. So that's just the red dabbed in. At that top point, and that will dry redder, and then obviously you can go back over the green to if you let that flood too much, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you're using the paints to create the depth and make those bits just a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Fantastic, mate. Love it.
So is that, are we?
Have you named him yet?
He's Nycaloth, isn't he?
He's a Nycaloth.
He's Nicky the Nycaloth.
Nicky. Well, Nikki and Rob, thank you very much. We will, back next time with another episode.
Yeah, couple of weeks.
Yep, couple of weeks. Absolutely. Thank you, Rob.
No, you're welcome.